The first strange lights appeared during the Festival of Three Moons. Elder Zixtal, her iridescent scales reflecting the ceremonial fires, paused mid-ritual as the unfamiliar gleam crossed the night sky. Unlike the gentle pulsing of starlight or the predictable dance of their moons, this light moved with purpose, leaving trails of blue-white fire in its wake. The gathered Sixians continued their celebrations, their elongated bodies swaying in synchronized patterns across the crystalline plains. Only Zixtal and a few other elders noticed how the mysterious light disappeared behind the mountain of ancestors, followed by a deep rumble that shook loose several crystal formations. "The signs are changing," Zixtal whispered to her apprentice. Mira, whose younger scales still held the pearl-like sheen of youth, "The sky speaks in new tongues." In the weeks that followed, more lights appeared. They came in different colors now, some green, others red, and occasionally brilliant purple. The Sixians, a species that had evolved in harmony with their crystal world, began to notice changes in their environment. The sacred resonance crystals, which had guided their civilization for millennia with their subtle harmonies, began producing discordant notes. Research Director Venra, operating from the planet's largest crystal tech facility, recorded unprecedented energy readings. Her team of scientists worked tirelessly, their serpentine bodies coiled around monitoring equipment as they tracked the increasing anomalies. "These energy signatures don't match anything in our historical records," Venra announced to the Council of Elders. Her presentation crystals projected images of the strange phenomena above their heads. "They're not natural occurrences, and they're becoming more frequent." The council chamber, carved from a single massive crystal, amplified her concerns through its acoustic properties. Each elder's worried murmur resonated through the structure, creating a symphony of anxiety. "There's more," Venra continued, her scales shifting to a troubled shade of azure. "We've detected objects in orbit around our world. They appear and disappear at regular intervals, but they're definitely artificial in nature." The revelation sent ripples of concern through the assembled elders. The Sixians had developed significant crystal-based technology over their history, but space travel remained theoretical. The idea of artificial objects above their world challenged everything they understood about their place in the universe. Chief Guardian Catalvor, responsible for planetary defense, spoke next. "We've observed these objects seemingly engaging with each other. Sometimes they appear to practice some form of combat ritual." His scales flickered with uncertainty at the last words. The first real crisis came during the harvest season. A massive explosion in the upper atmosphere sent shockwaves across the crystal plains, shattering several ancient growth formations. The loss of these crystals, which took centuries to form naturally, was devastating to the local communities who relied on their properties for everything from communication to food preservation. Mira, who had been conducting independent research, brought her findings to Zixtal. "Elder, I've analyzed the patterns of these appearances. They follow specific routes, almost like training exercises." She projected her data through a personal crystal, showing clear flight paths and repeated maneuver patterns. Zixtal studied the projections, her ancient eyes tracking the methodical movements. "You believe these are deliberate actions, not random natural phenomena?" "Yes, Elder, but there's something else." Mira hesitated, her scales shifting to a nervous yellow. "The energy readings suggest incredibly advanced technology. Whatever these beings are, they possess capabilities far beyond our understanding." The council debated their options. Some advocated for attempting communication, while others suggested retreating into the deep crystal caverns where their ancestors had first emerged. The decision was made for them when a new type of object began appearing in their skies, larger, more permanent structures that seemed to be observation points. As the first part of this crisis unfolded, none of the Sixians could have predicted how their first contact with humanity would reshape their understanding of the galaxy. They didn't yet know that their peaceful world had been mistakenly designated as an uninhabited training ground by human military forces, or that their crystal-based technology was virtually invisible to standard human scanning equipment. But as Zixtal watched another series of lights dance across the night sky, she felt an inexplicable certainty that their world stood on the brink of transformation. "We must prepare," she announced to the council. "Whether these beings come in peace or war, we must be ready to face whatever emerges from the stars." The council session ended with a unanimous decision to increase monitoring efforts and begin evacuating sensitive crystal formations to underground facilities. As the elders dispersed, Mira approached her mentor with a bold proposal. "Elder Zixtal, I volunteer to lead a surface observation team," she said, her scales shimmering with determination. "If we're to understand these beings, we need more than distant readings. We need to see them up close." Zixtal considered her apprentice's request, knowing it could mean sending her into unknown danger. But as another light streaked across the sky, she realized they were running out of options. Their world was changing, and they needed to understand why. The first piece of human technology to reach the surface came down during a crystalline storm, a time when the natural formations across the plains amplified the planet's electromagnetic field, creating spectacular light shows. At first, the Sixians mistook the falling object for another natural phenomenon, until it crashed through the outer layer of crystal formations and embedded itself in the sacred grounds of the southern plains. Mira led the investigation team, their protective scales activated to shield them from the residual energy emissions. The object was unlike anything they had ever encountered. A sleek metal cylinder with markings in an unknown script. Most intriguing was how it seemed to ignore the natural resonance of their world's crystals, existing in what Mira's team called a harmony void. "It's completely inert to our scanning methods," reported Teclin, the team's senior crystal technician. His scales rippled with frustration as he attempted to interface with the object using traditional methods. "It's as if it exists in a different frequency of reality." More debris began falling in the following days. Some pieces were small enough to be collected and transported to Venra's research facility, while others created impact craters large enough to disrupt the crystal growth patterns of entire regions. The Council of Elders declared a state of emergency when a particularly large piece of wreckage destroyed one of the ancient resonance towers that helped maintain their planetary communication network. Chief Guardian Kilivor organized evacuation protocols, moving many Sixians into the deeper crystal caverns. "We can't predict where these objects will fall," he explained during an emergency council session. "Our surface settlements are no longer safe." The situation reached a critical point when the first active human technology landed. It was a damaged survey drone, still partially functional, that crashed near one of the main crystal cities. Unlike the previous debris, this machine hummed with its own energy signature, creating disturbing interference patterns in the surrounding crystal matrices. Venra's team worked frantically to understand the device before its power source failed. "The technology is remarkable," she reported to the council, her scales shifting through patterns of excitement and concern. "It's processing information in ways we never imagined possible, but more importantly, it's broadcasting." The revelation that the drone was actively transmitting data to somewhere above their world sparked intense debate among the council. Some feared it would draw more dangerous objects to their surface, while others saw it as an opportunity to finally understand the beings responsible for their crisis. Mira, who had been studying the patterns of debris falls, made a startling discovery. "The impacts aren't random," she explained to Zixtal, projecting a map of the affected areas. "They're concentrated in specific zones, almost like designated target areas." The elder's scales darkened with realization. "They're using our world for weapons testing," she concluded grimly. "They don't even know we're here." The truth of their situation became impossible to ignore when the first human combat exercise directly affected a populated area. A series of explosions in the upper atmosphere created electromagnetic pulses that shattered crystal structures across an entire province. The devastation was unprecedented. Centuries of crystal growth destroyed in moments, countless historical records lost, and thousands of Sixians displaced. In the aftermath, Venera made a breakthrough in understanding human scanning technology. Their devices operate on principles that make our crystal technology virtually invisible to them, she explained. Our entire civilization exists in what they would consider background noise. The Council faced a terrible choice: remain hidden and watch their world be slowly destroyed, or risk everything by attempting to make their presence known to these seemingly destructive beings. The debate raged for days, while more debris rained from the sky and more Sixians retreated underground. It was Mira who proposed a daring solution. We need to adapt their technology, she suggested, presenting her research on the recovered drone. If we can modify our crystals to resonate at frequencies their machines can detect, we might be able to communicate. The project was approved, despite significant risks. Teams of crystal technicians worked to create hybrid interfaces between their technology and the salvaged human components. Each failure brought them closer to understanding, but also closer to disaster as more military exercises threatened their world. Zixtal, watching her apprentice work tirelessly on the communication project, felt a mixture of pride and fear. "We're about to change everything," she said to Kilvor as they observed another light show in the sky, no longer able to tell which lights were natural and which were human weapons. "Our ancestors could never have prepared us for this." The chief guardian's scales shifted to a resolute gold. "Change comes whether we're prepared or not," he responded. "At least this way, we choose how to face it." As the second phase of their crisis drew to a close, the Sixians stood at a crossroads. Their world, once peaceful and predictable, had become a dangerous landscape of fallen debris and shattered crystals. But in adapting to survive, they had begun to evolve in ways that would soon catch humanity completely by surprise. Lieutenant Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force had seen her share of strange situations during her 5 years of service, but nothing had prepared her for the alert that flashed across her combat simulator's display. What had begun as a routine training exercise in designated uninhabited space had suddenly become first contact scenario. "Control, this is Echo 7, she transmitted, watching the bizarre energy signature pulse on her screens. "I'm picking up some kind of structured signal from the surface. Definitely not natural interference." Meanwhile, far below on the crystal plains, Mira and her team monitored their hybrid transmitter with growing excitement. After dozens of failed attempts, they had finally managed to modify a crystal array to broadcast at frequencies detectable by human systems. "The signal is being received," Teclin reported, his scales flickering with nervous energy. "They've altered their flight patterns. They're responding." The human response came faster than anyone had anticipated. Within hours, a small scout ship descended through the atmosphere, causing ripples of anxiety through the crystal cities. Chief Guardian Kilvor deployed his forces in a protective formation around the landing zone, their scales tuned to defensive frequencies that would allow them to merge with the crystal terrain if necessary. Sarah Chen stepped out of her scout ship into what appeared to be a field of living crystal. Her suit's sensors were going haywire, detecting energy patterns that shouldn't have been possible. "Command, surface conditions are unusual. Crystalline formations everywhere, but they're behaving in ways that violate known physics." The moment of first contact occurred when Mira, against the Council's recommendations, emerged from her hiding place. Sarah watched in astonishment as what she had thought was simply another crystal formation shifted and moved, revealing the serpentine creature with iridescent scales that seemed to bend light around it. "Holy shit," Sarah whispered, her hand instinctively moving away from her weapon to show peaceful intent. "Command, we've got a situation here. This planet is definitely not uninhabited." Mira approached carefully, carrying a modified crystal that would allow basic communication. The device was a triumph of desperate innovation, a merger of salvaged human technology and Sixian crystal science that could translate basic concepts between the two species. The first exchange was simple but profound. Through the translator crystal, Mira conveyed, Your weapons fall from our sky. Our world is not empty. We are here. Sarah's response would be recorded in both human and Sixian histories. Oh God, we've been using your home for target practice. I am so sorry. The next few hours were a blur of activity as both sides tried to prevent a diplomatic disaster. Sarah's report to command triggered an immediate suspension of all military exercises in the sector. Emergency meetings were convened at the highest levels of Earth's government, while Sixian elders emerged from their crystal shelters to meet with the human representative. Zixtal, watching the proceedings, noticed something remarkable. The human visitor's presence was causing unexpected resonances in the surrounding crystals, patterns that suggested compatibility rather than discord. Perhaps, she mused to Mira, their destructive appearance was merely a product of ignorance rather than intent. The true scope of the misunderstanding became clear as both sides shared their perspectives. Human scanning technology, designed to detect artificial structures and energy signatures similar to their own technology, had completely missed the crystal-based civilization. The Sixians, with their fundamentally different approach to technology, had been invisible to standard surveys. Your entire civilization exists in what our sensors categorize as background crystal formation, Sarah explained, her voice filled with horror at the implications. We conducted geological surveys, but nothing indicated sentient life. Your technology, your cities, they all looked like natural phenomena to our instruments. Venera, interfacing with the human scanning equipment, made a discovery that would change both societies. Your technology's blindness to our existence is not a weakness, she explained through the translator. It's an opportunity. We perceive reality in fundamentally different ways, which means we can teach each other to see the universe through new eyes. The immediate crisis was transforming into something unexpected, a meeting of civilizations that could complement each other in ways neither had imagined possible. Human military precision and industrial capability coupled with Sixian crystal technology and harmonic understanding offered possibilities that excited scientists and engineers from both species. Yet challenges remained. Some human military officials were horrified at the potential diplomatic fallout of having unknowingly bombed an inhabited world. Some Sixian elders feared that closer contact with humans would forever alter their way of life. Both fears were valid. But as Sarah and Mira worked together to establish proper communication channels, it became clear that the benefits of cooperation far outweighed the risks. As the third phase of this historic encounter drew to a close, Sarah made an observation that would be quoted in future textbooks. We came to this world thinking we were alone in our corner of space, using it as a practice ground for war. Instead, we found not just life, but a civilization that might help us fundamentally change how we interact with the universe itself. Mira's response, her scales shimmering with optimism, was equally memorable. In seeking to protect ourselves from your unintended destruction, we have found partners who may help us reach the stars we once only watched in fear. The first human diplomatic delegation arrived 3 days after Lieutenant Chen's initial contact. They came in a ship carefully designed to minimize disruption to the crystal formations, its engines modified based on Sarah's preliminary observations. Ambassador Maria Torres led the mission, her decades of diplomatic experience about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. The Sixian Council had prepared a reception hall by adapting one of their grand crystal chambers. Venera's team worked tirelessly to create areas where humans could safely walk without interfering with the living crystal matrices that formed the backbone of Sixian society. The result was a stunning hybrid of human and Sixian architectural principles, crystal pathways that glowed with internal light, somehow supporting the weight of human boots without shattering. It's not just a meeting space, Mira explained to Sarah, who had been asked to stay on as a liaison. It's a symbol of what we can achieve together. The crystals are learning to resonate with your technology, just as we are learning to understand your ways. The first diplomatic session began with an unexpected gesture from the humans. Ambassador Torres presented the council with detailed maps showing every impact site from their military exercises, along with a comprehensive plan for cleanup and restoration. "We cannot undo the damage we unknowingly caused," Torres stated, "but we can work to heal these wounds and ensure nothing like this ever happens again." Chief Guardian Keilvor, his scales shifting through patterns of cautious optimism, responded with an equally surprising offer. "Our crystal technology allows us to detect energy signatures and spatial distortions that your instruments cannot perceive. We propose sharing this knowledge to prevent similar oversights in the future." The implications were staggering. Human military leaders, participating via secure link, realized that Sixian crystal technology could revolutionize their sensor capabilities. Meanwhile, Sixian scientists saw in human industrial methods a way to accelerate crystal growth and repair the damage to their world. But the path forward wasn't simple. During a particularly tense session, a human general questioned whether sharing advanced sensor technology with the Sixians might pose a security risk. Zixtal, her ancient scales rippling with wisdom, responded with words that would become famous throughout both civilizations. "You fear we might use your weapons against you, while we fear you might accidentally destroy us again. Perhaps the solution is not to hide our capabilities from each other, but to become so essential to one another that conflict becomes unthinkable." The breakthrough came when Venra and a team of human scientists discovered that Sixian crystals could be used to create unprecedented computing systems. The crystal's natural resonance patterns, when properly tuned, could process information in ways that made traditional quantum computers look primitive. In return, human manufacturing techniques could help the Sixians produce and shape crystals that would normally take centuries to grow naturally. Sarah and Mira, continuing their role as bridges between the species, established a joint training program. Human military personnel learned to recognize and respect crystal-based life signs, while Sixian observers gained understanding of human technology and customs. Their friendship became a model for cooperation between the species. "It's strange," Sarah commented during a break between sessions. "We came here thinking we were practicing for war, but instead we're learning entirely new ways of seeing the universe." Mira's scales shimmered in agreement. "And we feared your destructive power, only to discover that your real strength lies in your ability to adapt and make amends." The diplomatic proceedings took an unexpected turn when young Sixians began showing intense interest in human space travel. The concept of physically leaving their crystal world, rather than just studying the stars through resonance patterns, sparked a cultural revolution among the younger generation. Elder Zixtal, watching her people's rapid adaptation to human presence, shared her thoughts with Ambassador Torres. "Change comes to all civilizations. The true test is not whether we can prevent it, but how we choose to embrace it." Progress accelerated as both species learned to combine their strengths. Human engineers, working with Sixian crystal masters, developed new forms of spacecraft that incorporated crystal technology. The vessels could detect spatial anomalies that would have been invisible to traditional sensors, making space travel safer and more efficient. The former military testing grounds were transformed into joint research facilities. Where practice bombs had once fallen, crystal-human hybrid laboratories now stood, their designs incorporating the best of both civilizations' architectural principles. The scars of unintentional warfare were slowly being replaced by monuments to cooperation. As the fourth phase of this historic partnership drew to a close, Ambassador Torres made an observation in her official report. "We came to make amends for our mistakes, but we have gained far more than we could have imagined. The Sixians have not just forgiven our trespasses, they have shown us how to become better than we were." 5 years after the first contact, the crystal plains of the Sixian homeworld bore little resemblance to the battle-scarred landscape of the past. Where impact craters had once marred the surface, spectacular crystal metal hybrid structures now reached toward the stars. The former military testing zone had become the galaxy's premier center for crystal-based technology research. Mira, now serving as the head of the Joint Species Development Council, stood beside Sarah Chen as they watched the launch of the first crystal-powered starship. The vessel, named Harmony's Bridge, represented the pinnacle of human Sixian cooperation, a seamless blend of human engineering and crystal technology. Remember when we thought you were trying to destroy us? Mira's scales shifted through patterns of amusement as the ship rose silently into the atmosphere, its crystal drive creating beautiful resonance patterns in the sky. Sarah, now a colonel and chief liaison officer, smiled. And now we're revolutionizing space travel together. Funny how things work out. The partnership had transformed both societies in unexpected ways. Human cities had begun incorporating Sixian crystal technology, creating buildings that could respond to their inhabitants' needs and communicate with each other through resonance patterns. Meanwhile, young Sixians had embraced human innovation, forming the first generation of their species to actively explore space. Elder Zixtal, though retired from the council, had lived to see her people reach beyond their world. The observation deck where she spent most of her time offered a view of the massive crystal tech shipyards where human and Sixian engineers worked side by side. Our ancestors, she often remarked, would not recognize what we've become, but they would be proud of why we changed. The military training grounds that had once threatened Sixian existence had been repurposed into the Galactic Harmony Institute, where both species learned from each other. Human students studied crystal resonance patterns, while Sixian apprentices mastered human manufacturing techniques. The institute became famous for producing innovations that neither species could have developed alone. Venra's research team made perhaps the most significant breakthrough, a way to use crystal technology to detect and communicate with other forms of life that, like the Sixians, might be invisible to traditional human scanning methods. We were not the first to be overlooked, she announced at the project's unveiling. But thanks to our partnership, we can ensure we're the last. The human military, initially embarrassed by their near-catastrophic mistake, had become the strongest advocates for crystal tech integration. As Admiral James Chen, no relation to Sarah, put it, we came here to practice war and instead learn to see the universe in entirely new ways. Our mistakes led us to our greatest advancement. Chief Guardian Cadalvor, working with human defense forces, established new protocols for planetary survey missions. We protect both our peoples now, he declared, his scales shimmering with pride, not through weapons, but through understanding. The success of the human-Sixian partnership attracted attention from across known space. Other species began sending delegations to learn from their example of turning conflict into cooperation. The Crystal Plains, once a secret victim of military exercises, became a symbol of hope for peaceful first contact throughout the galaxy. As the Harmony's bridge disappeared into the depths of space, carrying the first joint human-Sixian exploration team, Ambassador Torres stood with the current Council of Elders. If someone had told me 5 years ago that our biggest military blunder would lead to our greatest diplomatic triumph, I would never have believed them. The youngest council member, whose scales still held traces of pearl-like youth, responded with what would become a famous quote, "The universe has a strange sense of harmony. What matters is not the discord we create, but how we choose to resolve it." The transformation extended beyond technology and space exploration. Human artists learned to create works using crystal resonance, producing pieces that could be experienced through multiple senses. Sixian crystal shapers incorporated human aesthetic principles, creating hybrid art forms that celebrated both cultures. On the 5th anniversary of First Contact, as thousands gathered to watch a joint crystal light exhibition in the sky above the former impact zones, Mira found Sarah standing alone, watching the celebrations. Thinking about that first day, Mira asked, her scales reflecting the dramatic light show above. Sarah nodded. I was so afraid I'd started an interstellar incident. Instead, I got to be part of the greatest partnership humanity has ever known. The stars sing differently now, Mira observed, using a traditional Sixian phrase. They sing for both our peoples. As the crystal lights danced overhead, painting the sky with the combined artistry of both species, it was hard to remember that this celebration was taking place in what had once been designated as Target Zone 7. The scars of the past have been transformed into foundations for the future, proving that even the greatest of misunderstandings could, with wisdom and patience, become opportunities for extraordinary growth. The mistake that had nearly destroyed one civilization had ended up advancing both, reminding all who heard the story that the universe's greatest gifts sometimes come disguised as its greatest challenges.